Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and I'm hitting up a novella because I don't feel like putting in the work of reading anything more serious than this. So here we go, Wickedly Magical, which is a prequel to the actual main trilogy. There are two trilogies. I actually haven't yet decided whether I'm doing the second one, because the second one had two books that were properly published and the third had to be self-published. I assume because they weren't selling well enough, but she had enough people who wanted that last book to do it. But you can really see in the last book of the second trilogy the lack of a proper editor. Like the seams are showing. You know, it's got that quality of there's some good bones to this book, but you need it better cleaned up. But anyways, neither here nor there, because we're talking about this novella. This is an immediate prequel to the first book of the series, and what we have here is basically she gets called in by a sort of a magical token that her predecessor, the Baba Yaga who trained, that is Barbara Yager, the one from the previous, from the first book. Barbara Yager that her predecessor teacher had at one point many years ago basically helped a then young woman find her husband and save him from, where he was trapped in the forest, and had been sufficiently impressed by this young woman's efforts that she had left this woman a token saying, if you ever need a favor from a Baba Yaga, you have impressed me with your steadfastness and so on and so forth, so you can use this token to call on me. She hasn't used the token. However, when her son runs into serious problems, she is able to give that token to the son, who then calls Barbara Yager in. And you get this cynical first introduction where she's like, okay, what is this? What, you need me to find you a treasure? And he does the shtick of calling his children his greatest treasure, but basically, his wife has fallen in with a guy running a commune, the cult leader, and has taken the kids, and through some mystical sort of who's it, and at first, of course, Barbara doesn't think that it's necessarily mystical, but it certainly seems weird. Basically, the courts have wound up being convinced that this father has molested his own children, that he's a terrible person, he can't get access to his kids, they're being kept in this cult compound. Like, it's all of these things. And she, after Chudo the dragon pretending to be a dog, because yes, he's still guarding the water of life and death, however that goes. I don't know Russian mythology very well. It's not an area I have looked into muchly. We all have our limits. There's only so much stuff one can know, and I don't know Russian stuff. So, if anybody happens to actually show up and actually listen to me talking about this, all like 3 people who do, and you actually know about this, feel free to bitterly complain about how much I don't know about this in the comments. But I already know I don't know anything about it. But let's riff off what's in the novel. So you have this dragon, and he now does so from inside of a Baba Yaga's hut. And the Baba Yaga's hut is now pretending to be an extremely large, mobile home thing, because it's much better camouflage, since we are no longer in the days where if somebody found a, house with chicken legs out in the woods, that they'll go, oh god, there's a witch living there. They are far more likely to go run screaming into the night, or, even just say, wow, that is some really weird building. Why are there no stairs? How do you get into the house if it's standing on legs? Or, think it's aliens or something. But the point is, you're not going to get nearly so many people, especially in the continental US, who will recognize that. And anyways, they don't, she doesn't want to have every single person coming to her trying to get Baba Yaga, especially, again, as Baba Yaga has a very, I mentioned this in the last video on this, she has a mixed reputation, that sometimes she's good and sometimes she's bad, and she really, really seems to fall under the same sort of umbrella as tricksters, where sometimes they do good things and sometimes they do bad things, and they don't traditionally really have, like, one bent or the other. And because Baba Yaga, the mythology surrounding it involves sometimes doing bad stuff, you have the concern that somebody, if they figure it out, might put together a witch hunt because, there's supposed to be an evil witch in the woods. Anyways, so she looks into it, and it indeed turns out that the cult leader has gotten a hold of a mystical widget, which he is using to manipulate people. And basically Barbara, in practical terms, breaks his widget, and then has one of those moments where you look at that and you just say, wow, that's kind of horrifying. And that is, she breaks the spell, and of course a whole bunch of people say, oh my god, you made me give you all of my money, and I can't believe that you convinced me to write, to give you the deed to our land, and so on and so forth. But there is also one woman who's like, place is great, food's great, I'm good, I'm sticking around for a while longer. Which I thought was just a hilariously pragmatic response, where it's just like, I don't care, this is good. I can stick with this. And then the other one, the wife of the man who came to Barbara to get his children back, looks at her children, and then declares, I'm sorry, kids, but this man needs me more than your father, you're just going to have to... And it's like, this is sort of like the worst parenting thing ever. I've been looking at a lot of How to Train Your Dragon stuff, and people complain about how Valka's a bad parent in How to Train Your Dragon, and, I get it, because, she gets kidnapped by dragons and then doesn't come back for basically 20 years, even though she could have at any time, because, and she informs Hiccup of this, I thought you would be in more danger because I couldn't kill dragons or whatever. But this woman looks her children dead in the eye and says, I'm sorry, kids, I am actively abandoning you for this guy who kidnapped you from your dad, who you miss. And it's like, wow, you're just looking them dead in the eye as you say that. I am impressed that you just went for broke on that. Really? The optics of that are incredible. And, by optics, I mean, wow, you look like an idiot. Anyway, so, this is a novella, so it's short. There's not, massive layers. And also, this one very clearly picks up as a very immediate prequel, because the last, section of the book, the last couple pages, are Barbara getting pulled to the first book of the trilogy, getting the call that she has to, head down there to do stuff. So, yeah, it's an entertaining thing. It's an entertaining bit watching her decide to pretend to be, a nice old lady with a lot of money. I kind of course, adore the fact that she doesn't have the emotional wherewithal to pretend to be a genuine, kindly, grandmotherly figure, that she sort of has to play this incredibly stiff-necked rich lady instead, and, can't even remotely bring herself to do this other role. Sort of like the strident limitations on Barbara Yager's acting capabilities, that, she can do irritable, grouchy old lady, she can do all kinds of things, but pretending to be somebody who is kindly and sweet, it just is a step too far for her. She can't do it. It's just not a chance. And I kind of adore that because it's a little hilarious to me. Um, yeah. So, anyways, that's this novella. There are a few other novellas in the course, to do with this trilogy. But I will probably be hitting the next novel next, although I'd have to double check because I don't exactly remember the finer details of where the novellas sort of sit in between the actual novels. Um, yeah, so these are interesting. It's a very modern, not urban, because it's not in an urban setting, but modern fantasy that as I said last time, it's that you take high fantasy and you graft it onto a modern setting. You say, what happens when the high fantasy gets sort of pushed into the background as time progresses and we hit the late 20th, early 21st century? How does high fantasy look once it sort of runs smack into that? And, those can be very interesting. So, yeah. And maybe at some point I'll even haul out that Mercedes Lackey, Rosemary last name I don't remember thing with the bard magic, but I'll be honest, those are books that I really can only read when I'm in exactly the right mood. Otherwise, I don't really usually feel like it. So I think that's all that I've got to say. Rambled off topic even more than usual, though perhaps not quite as much as some other of my rambles. And that's everything, and I will see you all next week.